This was not the place I thought I'd find my first dog. I was in the war-torn district of Sangin, Afghanistan back in 2010. It was one of the most dangerous places for coalition troops throughout the history of our time there. I'd seen Fred bebopping around the battlefield between gunfights when we were defending the little piece of ground we'd secured. He seemed immune to the circumstances he was living in. I started walking towards this dirty little pup with a piece of beef jerky in my hand. It was all I had to offer. When I got a few feet from him, I almost turned around. He was in rough shape and had clearly never been taken care of by a person. But I took a step closer, and then he did something that continues to have a profound impact on my life. He wagged his tail. We spent a few moments together, and that was all it took for our bond to form. He followed me and my fellow Marines everywhere. We quickly realized that Fred was important to us for reasons that we couldn't quite comprehend. It was an obligation and a duty we all felt inside. He'd given us so much by just being himself, and we owed it to him to try and get him back to the States, to give him the life he deserved. With a lot of help and even more luck, I was able to sneak Fred from the battlefield onto the helicopter and hide him on a massive US base called Camp Leatherneck. From there, fate took care of the rest. People stepped up in really big ways from unexpected places to help me get him to the US. I put him on a plane in November of 2010, and he was on his way to JFK in New York City, where my dad and my sister would be waiting for him. They drove up from Virginia and were excited but nervous about the little four-legged care package I was sending home. I wasn't sure how he'd adjust, but I knew my dad would take great care of him. I also didn't know if I'd make it out of Afghanistan. I'd already had a few close calls, and our operations in Sangin were getting more and more dangerous as we tried to provide stability to the people there. We all slept better at night, knowing that Fred was home in the US, eating cheese, sleeping in my bed, and hanging with my dad. For Fred, the US was a strange and wonderful new place. He traveled like a champ and adjusted to his new life quickly. He felt at home right away with my family and friends. I came back a few months later, but it took me a long time to feel like I was home, like I belonged somewhere. The only thing that made sense to me was Fred. Getting him out was and is one of the greatest accomplishments I've ever achieved. I didn't do it alone. I had help from lots of awesome people from all over the world. But the responsibility fell on my shoulders. For my fellow Marines and me, Fred represented something good we could protect. He was this stubbornly positive, loving, and funny creature in an unforgiving and often cruel environment. When I look back on the work we did in Sangin and the overall conflict in Afghanistan, there aren't a lot of lasting victories. We made a lot of progress in Sangin and were able to see the villages come back to life, but any ground we gained or people we helped have now fallen back into Taliban control. But not Fred. Fred is safe. Fred is warm. Fred is happy. I'm so thankful I could save Fred, and he saved me right back. He's given me a new purpose in life. He's reconnected me to who I was before the Marines, and together we are paying it forward through our books, speaking events, social media accounts, and in any other ways we can. I never miss a chance to tell Fred's story, because I've realized that it is my new duty. There were so many ways that it could have gone wrong for me and for Fred. At times, I struggled with comprehending why I was able to make it back when so many of our nation's finest men and women never returned to the country they served. The more I told our story on street corners and in dog parks across our country, the more I realized that this is why Fred and I made it back, to tell the tale, to live every day with the same stubborn positivity that made him wag his tail at me on the battlefield that day. The actions of my friends who laid down their lives for me and my fellow Marines are never far from my mind. The real burden, however, is paid by their families. They are constantly surrounded by reminders of their loved ones. For them, every day is Memorial Day. So the least we can do is to take some time to hear their stories, to spend time with their families, and to live our lives with gratitude and an unquenchable desire to serve one another, in big ways and small.
Si amas a los animales, suscríbete.